Welcome to the Waiting List podcast. Tell us the story.
It's like many things you start building from scratch.
And then I'm like, wait, I really do like watches because
You've seen so many watches that makes you excited.
I think I really do like watches.
Yeah. I think it's a great way to see if you are a watch enthusiast. Welcome back to another episode of the Waiting List podcast, where I am joined by the Justin Bieber loving Jacqueline and the Aldous Hodge loving Long Long. Both of them were very upset, especially Jacqueline, for the fact that I got it the other way round on the last episode. Yeah. God. Right. Today we welcome back Serge from Europastar for another chat. We enjoyed the first one so much, we decided to do it all over again. So thank you, Serge, for making time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure, Daniel, and really thank you very much for your time.
Right. For those that don't know, Europastar is a watch publication that has a history of over 90 years, starting out as a trade magazine, and Serge is now the CEO and publisher of Europastar. As mentioned before, if you aren't following us yet on Instagram, make sure you do. You'll find myself at Mr. Daniel Sum, and you'll find Long Long at Long Long Tun, which is LUNG times 2, and then THUN, all in one word, and Jacqueline at A Dose of Time. They have great Instagram pages, much better than mine. Serge can be found at Europastar.
That's because you only post sushi.
Well, I think between both of you, you both satisfy all the pictures I ever need for my daily dose of social media.
Okay.
For those that are wondering why I changed from Shanghai Watch Gang, I'm still using it, but that account was really a voice for the collectors. So I want it to be less about me and more about the collectors, because I'm just very good like that. All right, so let's get the biscuits and spill the tea.
Yay.
So now I know you like watches too, but you're actually very passionate, as mentioned in your last episode, Serge, about journalism. I wanted to know what kind of articles are of particular interest to you, and which articles that you've written recently did you enjoy researching about and writing about?
Well, there's actually for journalists a wealth of topics in the watch world, because if you're out of the watch world, you can think, oh, this is really a very tiny niche segment with a limited number of articles or topics. But I found out to be the opposite, especially also for the Swiss industry. It's a very important industry in Switzerland, and so it's also it has some very real business implications for the Swiss economy. But we mostly actually work through special reports. We like to really dig deep into some topics. So, for instance, the first issue of this year was about jewelry watchmaking, or watches and jewelry, and the ties between the two industries, the historical interactions. And so watchmakers that became jewelers that became watchmakers. Also, you have a lot of very, very interesting timepieces with a lot of jewelry. And so, yeah, we really like to do it like that. And then you have a lot of topics that are about innovation, about heritage. I mean, you can go in all directions. Basically, I would even say you can take any topic, and one way or another, you will find a way, a link with watchmaking. That would be a nice test, actually. Try to find something tied to watchmaking for any topic.
Because you recently written, I had a look, like one with an article with lots of CEOs on the pandemic, and also I enjoyed very much your blockchain articles. I always find that quite interesting, because it's related to watches but not related to watches. So it's always refreshing to read something which isn't really a product review, I'll be honest. Yeah, so I found those articles of particular interest. But recently, you've also launched your podcast called Watch Files. Is that a play on X-Files?
It is actually, and it's
I thought it was.
to really dig into some mysteries or lesser known stories of the watch world. For instance, lately we had an episode about Gerald Genter, the famous watch designer, and how in the 80s he was kicked out of Geneva show, Watch Geneva show, because of his watches that were luxury watches, but featuring pop culture icons such as Popeye or the Pink Panther or Mickey, and that didn't bode well for the organizers of the show. Although today it's very much mainstream to put a pop art figure on your watch, and you even have some customization where you can put Popeye on your favorite luxury watch.
So hang on, you're saying that Gerald Genter, the designer of, by then probably everybody would have known, the Royal Oak and Nautilus, got kicked out because he produced a set of watches which was not agreeable with the organizers of this show. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Actually, to be more precise, they asked him to cover or to remove the state timepieces with the pop art figures, but he considered himself an artist. So it's like a painter. You wouldn't tell him, we only want you to exhibit this one and that one because the other ones, they hurt us. He has a global view, and it's either like many artists, either you take me as a whole or you don't take my work at all. And so he decided to leave at the end because of that. So that was that was in 1984. He was a popular figure, but of course the watch industry was a bit different back then, and it was also the 80s. It was an era of confusion for watchmaking with the quartz crisis, with a lot of interrogations on the future of the industry and if it could survive. So that was an interesting episode, and we tried to focus on some anecdotes, lesser known anecdotes, and try to uncover some facets of this industry.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a lot of what I personally love, a lot of inside information, right? Like the stuff that you can't read and is spread through word of mouth. I love that shit. Recently, you did a podcast about Zenith. Can you just share with us what was discussed then? I assume it was the El Primero movement, but was it?
Yeah. Actually, it was also the same period, the 70s, 80s, when Zenith was actually sold to an American company called Zenith. It's a lesser known story, but actually there was a brand in electronics called Zenith in the US, and they bought the watch brand called Zenith in Switzerland in order to develop quartz watches. Well, it didn't work, and among the collateral damages was they asked the employees to get rid of the mechanical watches and also the recently developed El Primero chronograph.
Wow!
And so that's this one is more widely known, but one of the watchmakers of Zenith hid some of the plans and prototypes and some of the El Primero movements in the attics of the Zenith building in Le Locle in Switzerland. So it would allow a few years later for the production to start again. And notably, they also provided Ebel and Rolex with the El Primero or modified version as well. So that's where the fate of some brands lie, in some employees that do things that they are not supposed to do.
Yeah, well, so I just want to ask though. So Zenith had made this automatic chrono movement, and you're saying that an employee hid it in the attic after it had been made. Is that right?
Yeah, actually, even now Zenith has done some has enlightened people on this story. The man was called Charles Vermeau, and he was actually the engineer in charge of the El Primero lab. And he was really, when this American Zenith bought this Swiss Zenith, he felt that it was not going to end up well. And when they asked him to either to get rid of all the calibers, he thought, okay, I think there might be a way in the future to do it again. So let's not get rid of everything. And he was a kind of, he resisted this order. And a few months later, the whole factory closed.
Okay. I read about this, not this particular topic. I've read about the next question I'm going to ask you about, and I don't know if you have the information for it, but in terms of the first automatic chrono movement, the El Primero by Zenith, at the time there were 3 companies vying for that title. There was Zenith, Bulova, and also Seiko, right? And my understanding is that although Zenith have completely announced that they were the first, they might not necessarily have been the first.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you have at some specific time in history, you have like a coalition of innovation, and they all pop up at around the same time because it's in the air. some way it's and innovation is not only one person, it's really a succession of small steps. But what happened that year was that Zenith was the first. Actually, it was Zenith and Movado because they were part of the same entity, and they announced the El Primero. I think it was in January, but the other group, which was the Chronomat group, there was Breitling, there was Heuer, a few others, Buren as well, the brand Buren. Anyway, it was also a coalition of brands, and they commercialized it first. So they launched it. So Zenith announced it first, but the others, they commercialized it first. And then Seiko in the autumn really produced it more heavily, if I'm correct. That was a year that was quite intense for the automatic chrono, but as this story shows, a few years later, even a few months later, actually all the attention would go to the quartz movements. So bad timing in a way.
That's one of the reasons why I bought my Pogue. I'm a Seiko Pogue because it has a 6139A movement, which is like the first automatic chrono from, I think, their range. They quickly upgraded it to a 6139B movement. So the 6139A, I feel like it was built so because they felt they were in a race. Maybe it wasn't wholly reliable, and then they very quickly used something and made it more reliable with the 6939B movement. So the Pogue I have is 6139A movement. So that's one of the reasons why, and also the whole of the space story and all that kind of stuff. That's also why I bought that watch.
It was a race. It was definitely a race, and you still have controversy around it. It's true.
Well, it's good that at least we pointed out that there is controversy around it. It isn't like wholly that Zenith definitely were there first.
Who knows what we can find in history? You remember there was Riosec, who was celebrated as the inventor of the chronograph, and then Louis Moinet, and maybe we're going to find another one. That's the thing with history and with innovation. You know that it's like Thomas Edison in the US. He claimed a lot of innovations and patents and inventions, but we actually know that he also took a lot of it from other people. So it's always a bit tricky, and that's the beauty of history. It's always that there's not always a clear answer to your questions.
Talking about like history and trends, your magazine has seen the history of watchmaking for at least over 90 years. But away from the industry, what changes has the industry seen from the watch collector or the watch consumer side, do you think?
It's a really, I mean, that's really this is the new figure, because for a long time, and it's reflected also in our magazine, the dialogue was really between the brands and the retailers. And now the collector, with a lot of new tools, has really gained leverage. And you see some collectors even creating their own watch brands, which would have been more difficult earlier on. So now it's really a dialogue. It's part of the community, the collector, and that's why brands try to connect with them directly. And it's really, I mean, you see the auction results. You see this is very vibrant actually, and you see on Clubhouse, for instance, very recently in the last weeks, we've seen an explosion of talks about the watch industry, and new watches, and heritage, and innovation. And there you see all these different angles I was talking about. So it's I mean, that was not something really that it was more like a top-down, I would say, a top-down functioning of the industry with the brands and the retailers, and then the end consumers. And now, of course, all of that has changed, and it's a more horizontal relationship, I guess.
Okay, you kind of touched on my next question, because you mentioned the Clubhouse and as a tool recently that's been established. But what has been the most interesting developments in the watch industry recently? And I want to put a timestamp on that. I would say this year and last year. So COVID, really, this period. What's been the most interesting development?
Well, COVID for me has really acted as an accelerator of trends that were already there before COVID. So you see several of them. Of course, the digitization, e-commerce, of course, the pre-owned as well, and the interest for heritage. So it has, in a way, accelerated the shift towards really maybe less and less volumes for the watch industry, for the Swiss watch industry, because for the connected watch or for Apple, it's times are good, but maybe less volumes, but more value, and really trying to infuse your soul into your watch, and I hope trying to get more authentic dialogue with everyone, with the customers, with the retailers. But at the same time, you need some volumes, and the decrease in volumes of the watch industry is also worrisome, because it's at what can you function efficiently as an industry with less and less volumes every year. So I think there is still a lot of potential for the watch industry. But it's true that it's been really a tough time in the acceleration of trends.
I mean, I think it was last week or the week before, certainly, HYT was brought to my attention in the fact that it's going through some restructuring. So maybe would you say that's the first casualty of COVID? And you see, a few other brands kind of failing.
Yeah, well, in Switzerland, and the watch industry is used to crisis. I mean, it's not the first crisis, it will not be the last, and it's quite resilient. And also, Switzerland has a very good system for helping the companies. So they fund the loss in working time, actually. So they would take charge of the loss. So, but it only, I mean, even if this situation is exceptional, and actually the funding has been, the financial aid to the companies has been extended, but once this funding will stop, that will be the critical moment for a lot of brands and companies, and also all the suppliers, which are heavily hit. And so this is kind of a safeguard in Switzerland that we have against crisis, and historically it has proven to be well. But You see also a lot of the suppliers trying to get into other industries like medical industry,
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
the airplane industry, the car industry, to
Mm.
diversify. So, and actually, if you mention HYT, the brand has stopped, but the company that is behind HYT is actually still exists, and they provide solutions with the fluids for the medical industry. So it shows that maybe you will see this diversification more and more.
I mean, in terms of COVID, perhaps the biggest casualty is Baselworld, right? That we mentioned in the and to some extent Watches and Wonders. Although there will be an event later on this year, actually next month in April.
Yeah.
But how will Baselworld come back, do you think?
Well, that's a really big question mark.
Basically, have you heard anything?
Yes. The new concept is called Our Universe. You may have seen it.
Yeah.
So that's is the same group. It's also the same management, but they are trying to because Baselworld was not only watchmaking; it was also jewelry and gems. And as we said in the last episode, that was a bit of this whole world of jewelry, watches, and gems uniting. So if it's rises again like a phoenix, it will have to be a bit different. So they do have plans, and actually they plan to do something this summer with a physical event and also having a digital platform. But I mean, who knows what happens until the summer? So all the I would say all the whole event industry and the tourism industry as well is really heavily hit. So it's quite difficult. They also own Art Basel, by the way, the same.
I think that's doing quite well, right?
Yeah, but it's also tricky because of the situation and the peculiarities of the art world. But and behind all of this is the authorities, the canton of Basel. So it's also the states behind it. So we'll see. I mean, it's they want to do something, but we still have to wait. We haven't had the official dates. Yeah,
it's interesting because if it's in the middle of the year, a lot of the watches, I don't know what the situation is now, but a big reason, wasn't it, that Baselworld was at the beginning of the year and so was SIHH, was the novelties were geared towards that time. So I don't think, I mean, if I'll be honest, the Swiss watch industry, you know as well as me, in July, August, nobody's like, where is everybody? They're on holiday, right?
Yeah. No, that's true. Although I would say also our calendar has changed. And I was interviewing the CEO of Maurice Lacroix lately and the Swiss brand, and he told me that they have switched completely the strategy that back when there was Baselworld or the fairs, they would release all the novelties at the same time.
Yeah.
So now they plan one release per month. That's their strategy. So the calendar has changed. The way you release watches has changed. So any new events, and I do hope there will be physical events, has to comply with this new reality. That it's not all at the same time.
So that's kind of like an example of basically being more consumer focused rather than retail focused, right?
It's true. They all the fairs now, they want to do B2B to C, so business to consumer and to community. Try to get the whole community under one roof. And I think everyone, the retailers is trying to, the brands are trying to work both with the retailers and the end consumers in parallel. So doing direct sales and working with intermediaries. So it's not always an easy situation today. It's not as comfortable as it used to be with the distribution network. So of course, COVID has a role, but I think for Baselworld, but the fact that there is also so much direct sales today that the retailers, I mean, the power of the retailers has decreased. So it also explains you have the technological revolution, but you also have changes in distribution, and all of that explains this this change of the watch fair. So yeah, so
I think one of the things we've seen is the acceleration of brands more willing to go online. You know, at the beginning, there was a lot of brands that were very willing to go on Instagram Live, for example, and these live streaming platforms. And now with the advent of Clubhouse, a lot of brands are giving that a go. I recently saw Max Buser has joined onto that platform. What do you think that brands have done in this period of time has worked and perhaps not worked?
Well, there for social media, it's an interesting. I mean, it's a strategical choice because you also get a lot of backlash on social media for anything you do, and now you see brands releasing something, and immediately you would have haters. You will have a lot of people trashing the novelties. So some brands are still wary of that, and you even have. Brands like not in the watch world was there was Bottega Veneto. I think they, if I'm correct, they withdrew completely from the social media. So once you launch in social media, I would say you need a longer term strategy because it can backlash as well. Because having a direct dialogue is good. But you know, you need to be authentic in this dialogue in some way, and otherwise you get a bit trashed. So it's a whole new world for brands to cope with this direct communication as well. And I remember the Instagram Live. You remember at the beginning of the pandemic, all the brands were doing Instagram Lives, and I haven't seen so many of them lately. Also, sometimes you had like the CEO, and there were maybe 12, 15 people watching. So it was not like a huge audience. So they were there really to be there. And I think it's the same with a lot of new things that you test them, but it's not necessarily good for your brand image. So you have to think about it first.
But I think to some extent, social media is so quick that you can try stuff. And then also, you know, it's, you know, before you had the daily paper, which was like, as you say, daily, and then it was yesterday's news. It isn't yesterday's news now. It's like half an hour old. It's old news. It's gone.
Minute news.
So people forget as well quickly. So it's a really good place to trial. And I do think, I mean, social media is a marketer's world, right? So
exactly,
marketer's world is about trying stuff, and then, you know, if it doesn't work, try again. But so anyway, Jacqueline, do you have something to come with?
Well, I was just curious, why did Bottega like stop their social media stuff?
I'm not sure they explained clearly, but I think it was also to retain some kind of exclusivity. They were feeling that the social media was and you see some of the most exclusive brands are not on the social media. So so you it's like everything, you have a cycle and a counter cycle, because there is an innovation, and only later on you will see the more negative aspects for maybe for your brands. So I don't know. It's something that comes and goes with time, but it's interesting to see some brands withdrawing from social media now.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because when you brought that up, Serge, I looked up their account on Instagram, and what they have in place now is this account called New Bottega. And they have about 500,000 followers, but instead of being about their products, in the bio it says very clearly that this, instead of being like a official Instagram for Bottega, it's treated as a digital journal dedicated to this brand, and it's curated by one person. So this one person basically curates the theme not just all Bottega stuff, but she also probably like finds photos from like photographers or famous magazines to curate like a eye-pleasing experience through color schemes. So I thought that was interesting. Like maybe you talk about exclusivity, but then them doing this is also like a plan B, like, oh, we're still here, but we're just not doing what everyone else is doing, but we're still here. Like we
I
still
think
have
it's like a
brand
buffer
presence.
though, isn't it? Like if any, like it's like Serge, if you've got the backlash, you're not taking it directly because the curator guy is taking it, right? Maybe. And there isn't a blue tick against it either. So I don't know how official it is. I don't know.
Maybe it's a way, it's true, to control a bit better by just having contents that are affiliated to the brand, but not directly. So it's more evocative of the universe they want to be in. And you see a lot of that today also, even with watch brands, that they don't share the products, but more like the spirit they want to have. Yeah. So it's I mean, if you're ready to go on social media and have a direct conversation, I would say be ready also to get a lot of criticism, and that's also good in some way, So that's but not all brands are ready to confront this, I guess.
Certainly, I think when it comes to fashion, I've seen some fashion KOLs that seem to communicate more authentically than the brand pages. Brand pages is really advertising is very strong and not really. It's like product, because the product always has to appear sometimes. Not all brands, but there's some brands that do it. And I actually think some of the KOLs do a better job actually for social media, for this kind of platform.
Yeah, because when it's a brand, it's always it's first it's marketing, of course.
Right. I want to bring the conversation back a little bit. We've talked about, what brands have got wrong and got right in this period of time. But do you think that these are the conversations that we should be having within the watch industry now? What conversations do you see as quite pressing and critical to the watch industry?
Well, the most critical thing is first how to get people to actually wear watches. That's something critical for the industry, is to keep the watch as a desirable object and find all ways to do that, and maybe unite around some platforms, some solutions to increase this awareness, because it's a tiny industry. We compare it with the car industry, but it's a tiny industry, and I'm not too worried in the sense that I see a level of desirability for some brands and some watches, and your show is called the waiting list. And I think as long as there will be waiting lists in the watch industry, it will be okay, because it's a proof of the desirability. But then there is, of course, the value is increasing, but the volumes are decreasing. So do we have to settle on the fact that it will be luxury only? That's a big question, I think, for the watch industry, especially for the Swiss watch industry. Can it still produce watches that are affordable? Then we just discussed about the consumer. It's how to have an authentic interaction with the consumer and not have just interaction for the servicing or for the unpleasant experiences, and how to provide content and value. And we see what brands are doing with the heritage. This fascination for the past is incredible. We see more fascination, I feel, for models from the 70s or from the 60s than for the current innovation. So we'll see if it stands for a long time, because it's also maybe reflective of the current generation.
Why do you think that is?
Why do
you think that is?
Well, it doesn't only concern watches, I guess. We have I don't know if it's nostalgia, but it's there is a fascination for this era. We say that the 70s until the 80s, it was the last generation that thought that the future would be better. I'm talking about the West, because in China, you are a booming country. You have a different perspective. And the watch industry is also relying a lot on this new generation, on your generation as well. And that's very good. But now with the stop in international travels, the brands are trying to catch up more with the local consumers also in Switzerland. And to be honest, even with my friends in Switzerland, my childhood friends, I don't see this level of interest for watches that I see when I travel to China or to Japan or even the US. So the first concern for the Swiss watchmakers is how to get younger Swiss people to get interested into watches as well.
Okay. Do you think that the Apple Watch will have a similar effect as the Swatch watch did?
Well, for the Swiss watch industry, the Swatch was part of what allowed the Swiss watch industry to rebound and to also eventually allowed it to make mechanical desirable again. And so it's a bit an irony, but that's the Swatch contributed also in its own way to the industrial rebuilding of Switzerland for the Swiss watch industry. So also concerning mechanical. Anyway, meanwhile, the connected watch is not. It doesn't stem from the Swiss watch industry. So it rather takes the volumes of the affordable Swiss watch segments. So I think I wouldn't compare both effects. I would just compare maybe the fact that they are both critical moments for the watch industry. But I do believe that we will see an increased polarization between maybe a daily connected watch that you use as part of your daily connection, which is quite natural, and maybe it will even go to some other areas like the glasses and other places. And on the other side, the watch industry as part of, let's say, high fashion and statements on your maybe identity. And so that's I don't think they are necessarily in opposition. They are in opposition for the entry level.
I think it's interesting, you mentioned that the interest in these 70s models is really high right now. And I wonder, as this generation that I'm in and Jacqueline and Lon are in, as they get older, there is also a nostalgia to the very early hardware electronic stuff. Like actually, I think you're seeing it with games. Gamers like
retro gaming.
If you retro gaming, if you look at the old Game Boy and certain. My brother was talking to me about Pokemon, how they're so not the Pokemon cards. Well, Pokemon's different, a completely different world. I mean, the initial game and how collectible they are, and even buying, let's say, the first VHS player, because as we're developing, everything is becoming more cloud-based, where we don't actually have necessarily the hardware that we need. We don't need the hardware anymore. Everything seems to be going through a screen on your phone or the TV. So it'd be interesting to see whether these things also pick up nostalgia. I believe I spoke to a friend of ours, Ariel, and he believes that it will, because this is what we grew up with. So it'd be interesting to see that.
Well, I recently watched a documentary on the recent boom of Pokemon cards and baseball cards, and they actually explain exactly what you said. It was like, if you look at the people who were collecting these cards in the mid 90s, most of them have grown up, obviously. I mean, all of them have grown up, and then most of them have stable jobs or are doing fine financially. And then with COVID, everyone wants to diversify their portfolios, and that's why they're looking into these different options. And that's why we're seeing this huge influx of prices. So
Mhm.
yeah.
I certainly still have, some game guides that, that I used to use when I used to play games. But I'm going to finish off with this last question. What growth areas do you see in particular for brands? Like, which areas should they, do you believe? Like blockchain, I think you've covered on one aspect, but I'm sure that's not the only one. What else do you see?
Well, I think brands, we've just mentioned nostalgia, let's say, and vintage. So let's mention pre-owns, which is maybe one of the biggest drivers of change for the watch industry, because a watch is of course an object that you can keep for a long time. So the integration of pre-owned is on the way. We've seen a lot of consolidation. We've seen groups buying specialists of pre-owns. We've seen several moves in this area. And I think this is the secondary market and the primary market are like becoming more and more one single market. So that's a very interesting area of growth. And all that is supported also by digital. So I think if the watch industry, and that comes back to what I say, but unites around a single market where you can buy the pre-owned, you can buy the new, you can have it serviced easily, you can buy it digital, you can buy it in the store, you can have the full experience, and the product is still desirable. I think we are moving towards, through crisis also, and innovation, we are moving towards this unification of the watch market, where every channel will be used and every type of watch will be used. And some brands are more advanced, than others, but I think everyone is contributing in its own way.
Well, I think that's a great way to finish. But before we finish, Serge, we have a quick fire for you, which is a series of 10 questions that I'm going to ask you, which are not really watch related. Some are. Allow us just to go off the beaten path of the usual interview process. So we're going to start. Number one, aside from your work and journalism and watches, what else do you like to do?
Well, I'm right now, I'm in the Dominican Republic, so I'm going to answer traveling. I'm going to, that was even if the pandemic, of course, has been more tricky, but we've tried to travel a lot inside the US as well, and to discover new places. And that's always, we have this chance of being able to work remotely. At least I hope this will be something we keep, and that the way of working will be more flexible, and we can really combine the private interest with professional tasks. Let's say it like that.
Okay. Number two, aside from this interview, what has been your most memorable interview?
Well, of course, the first episode of this interview.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I didn't know you were going to be so honest, but it's great to have such an honest guest. Yeah.
You know what? Before I worked as a journalist in the watch industry, I did write something linked also to the watch industry. There was a producer of safes, and he was a producer of safes, physical safes, of course. Now we talk about digital safe, but a physical safe for the La Chaux-de-Fonds-le-Loc area, where you have all the places where they storage the gold, of course, that will be processed. Yeah. And so he was really like a old kind type of guy, working on these safes with a lot of anecdotes. And that was really, that was not yet in the watch industry, but he was working for the watchmakers. And you could see that he was passionate about building this safe, and he was like a work of catch and play with the thieves. And it's still an actual problem, actually, of course. But to see this level of passion of building safes, that was really quite, that was a good, I don't know, I just happened to think about it now, but that was a good interview.
Okay. Well, we'll just cut that out, because that wasn't necessary. Right. Number three. Right. If you weren't a journalist, what would you be?
Well, Well, my first I wanted to be a tennis player, but then Roger Federer came, so I abandoned. So
you
yeah, that's
went to the side to make way for him. You're like,
yeah.
I don't need
didn't
this.
want to.
I don't need this in my life.
I didn't want him to be in my shadow, so it's okay. I did that.
Yeah.
No, more seriously,
He's not even good looking, is he? God.
Well, yeah. Well, he's our national
okay.
hero, so be careful. Be careful. No, I wanted to be a diplomat actually. So probably I would try my way in this. In also another way of representing Switzerland around the world besides watches.
Okay. I mean, talking about Roger Federer, and I know he's like a brand ambassador for Rolex, but recently there's a rumor going around that nobody's made it in life unless you've actually appeared on the Waiting List podcast. I don't know who came. I don't know who came up with that, but
I've heard about it.
You heard about it too.
Yeah, it's a famous one.
Yeah, because there was this guy called I think his name was Obama or something. I don't know what his first name was. Yeah, he hasn't been on the show, and people are questioning whether the guy's actually legit.
Yeah, because he say he could, but then he couldn't. So
yeah.
Can he be?
I remember. I think some agent approached us, but I think we had to go for some food or something. So we haven't got time for that. Right. Number 4. What's the best thing about Asia? You can't say the people, the food, the culture, or the history because it's so generic, right?
Non-generic, yeah.
Let's be more specific.
and I have to be neutral because I'm Swiss.
Because you're Swiss.
No, but and being a Swiss actually, it's really when you learn food in Asia and especially in Hong Kong, it's true. Is the energy you have? It's so vibrant. It's so and it's crazy. It's this energy level that is addictive, I think, and that of course we don't have as much in Switzerland, as you may have noticed. We have other qualities, but this energy is crazy, and of course this energy now is in China is crazy with the development of the country.
Okay, yeah, food is definitely not up on the list on Swiss, man. Oh my god, Basel was so bad. But,
yeah,
right.
Yeah. Well, if you come to Switzerland, I will show you some better things.
That was exactly what I was intending. Yeah. That was the purpose of my question. Right.
Yeah.
Number 5. Now, you're a person that I mentioned takes their notepad when talking to people, right? And you scribble down lots of things. And I think, like I said, you're the only journalist I've met that has actually done that. My question is, do you have any standard on the notebook that you use? And what pen do you use to do so? Or do you have not any? Because I like a good notebook.
The notebook is probably the item that the watch brands give away the most after the presentation, when back in the days when there were still physical presentations. And I must say that I have a particularity that I write in a way that it's impossible for any other people to decipher. To read. So for me, any pen is good. I'm not too picky on that, and I use a lot of. I'm actually an living advertisement probably, because you notice that many of my notebooks are branded by the name of a watch brand, because as a journalist you have access to a lot of these notebooks. So yeah, it's a bit of a living advertisement, but if it does the job, it does the job for me.
We should get a notebook that says, I gave Roger Federer his first break by moving aside. Something like that.
I helped him.
Yeah, you helped him.
I helped launch his career by not
I'm actually going to see if there is a Tintin notebook that I can get you.
There are. Yeah.
Right.
There has to be, of course.
Yeah, there's got to be, right?
I probably had one at some point.
Right. Yeah. Number 6. What's the most important rule in business your parents passed down to you?
Well, being in a family business, it's a tricky question, but we don't really discuss much about business together, really, to be honest. But they are just very authentic, genuine person, and I think that's the most important thing in life. And non-arrogant, very, very much not arrogant. So I really like that trait.
Right. So being humble, great. That's great advice. Number 7, what watch do you find personally of interest and why?
Well, I've starting in the watch industry, then you really develop an interest in watches, and you see so many different niche. And we talked about some of them today, but I couldn't really isolate one single watch. I mean, or one watch I have personally. I do some lists sometimes of the watches I would like, but then it takes a whole notebook as well. But so I then need another notebook. But I mean, this is the level of creativity that there is. I mean, very often we hear criticism that the brands don't innovate, but still I see a lot of as long as there will be this level of innovation, of creativity at least, and desirability, also with the new brands, also with the startup brands we mentioned, that will be a healthy sign. So I cannot be too specific on that one, because that's then we will be on a whole other discussion.
Right. I don't know if you can be specific about the next question, but who has been the most memorable CEO that you've interviewed?
There's a blank because
so just like next.
I would say from Kari Voutilainen, who is the most discreet, humble person, that's it's very moving
so
in a way.
Quiet,
that's he's I mean, that's okay, he's on one, let's say, extreme, and on the other extreme you have people who are over the top. So I would say any CEO that is not a technocrat, any CEO that you can have a genuine conversation, because we sell, but the watch industry tries to sell emotions. So there is nothing worse than a technocrat. You know what I mean by technocrat? Is just kind of administrative mindset that sells emotion. I think today more than ever, and okay, you think of a watch CEO, you think of automatically of maybe Jean-Claude Biver or Max Busser or François Paul Journe, because they are also creators. And so, but again, it doesn't have to be loud. It can be Kari Voutilainen, and it will be fascinating.
Okay. Number 9. The most craziest watch idea you've ever heard?
Well, there have been some tests to associate mechanical with connectivity.
Okay.
I think that would be, I know some brands are doing it, but if in the future there is a way to reunite these both worlds, that would be quite crazy. Maybe in the same way that you have the junction of quartz and mechanical in some hybrid movements.
Okay, a bit like Grand Seiko,
the
spring drive or something.
The FP Journe Elegant.
Yeah, that's another one. Yeah,
of course, the Elegant, spring drive. So maybe this one is too specific, the reply, but it's maybe it doesn't seem that crazy, but I'm fascinated by this idea of the research in that area of connection and the mechanical. And
okay.
Let's see what happens.
Right, the last one. Do you read? And if so, what book would you recommend that everybody should read?
Well, I do read in English or French, and I love literature. Of course, I mostly love history books. But recently, the most recent book I read was it's called Future Lux, and it's by Erwan Remberg, who's an analyst and author. And I just wrote an interview with him, and it's 21 ideas or predictions for the future of the luxury industry, including for watches.
Okay.
You may have seen it, so I would recommend reading it. And otherwise, anything linked to history will be a favorite. And I must say, it's a shame that I really noticed that with the new digital era, I read a bit less books than in the past, except Europastar magazine, of course, which I recommend as well. Yeah. But it's true that I noticed that my attention span, which is already not that high, has been decreased in this digital era. So yeah. So that's a bit of a. I think it happens to a lot of people, but I'm convinced. I mean, once you open a book and you start getting into it, and I know you read a lot as well. It's also an addiction. So it's never fun.
I like it. I love it. I mean, to get lost in the book is such a rare thing where your mind can just be cut off from the rest of the world for a few hours. Because we're so connected right now. Is such a pleasurable experience.
Exactly. And I mean, we mentioned print and digital, and I truly believe that we find pleasure in both. And that's very comforting as a thought.
Well, that again, I think is the perfect place to finish this interview. Thank you very much, Serge, for coming on.
Thank you.
I very much enjoyed our conversations.
Thank you for staying up so late.
Thank you for your insights.
Sorry,
as well.
I maybe I look a bit tired now. It's true that it's 1 a.m. here already, and but I really enjoyed it with you guys, and I hope to see you soon, and wherever in the world we can travel.
How you look is what happens when people spend about 2-3 hours with me in conversation.
Exhausted.
I just tend to exhaust them out. I also want to say a big thanks to everyone listening. I never really say that at the end of a podcast, but I just wanted to say that, and it really does make our day, and I can assure you that the guys, the audience aren't just numbers to us. The other day, Long Long was still saying that she would do this if only 4 people were listening, and that was inclusive of ourselves. So I'm not sure I would agree with that, but that's Long Long. So see you guys on the next one. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Waiting List podcast. Hit the subscribe button, and the next episode will come straight to your phone as soon as it's ready. Whilst I'm here, please remember to leave a nice review and follow us on Instagram at the Waiting List Podcast.